Well, hello there. With this whole quarantine and the lockdown and coronavirus, it's really shaken things up. People are recommending social distancing. Everyone's trying to do their part to be able to stop the spread. With all this found time that we have on our hands, I thought, what if I was productive during this time? Maybe even a bit creative. So I reached out to some of my friends, some writers, some filmmakers, and we decided to put together a little something for you. What we are going to be doing is every week releasing the chapter of a story. I will be reading it to you as your host, John Grayson, but we will have guest writers who will write the next segment. So it's the same story, same characters, but from a bit of a different perspective, and I think it's one that you'll enjoy. I have written the first chapter that you'll be hearing tonight, and I hope you enjoy episode 1 of the Quarantine Chronicles. I awoke to the smell of burning gasoline. My ears rang, and I can make out muffled screeching sounds, which I assumed to be people yelling. Something wasn't right. Tried to take a breath, but immediately felt pain shoot through my chest. Most likely 2 broken ribs. No. Make that 3. I couldn't tell, but there was a high possibility of hemorrhaging. I tried to open my eyes, but could only see out-of-focus figures and flashes of light darting through my vision. The fire next to me felt good, but it was then that I realized I was absolutely freezing. The snow had made my body numb, and I knew I needed to warm up soon or risk serious injury. With each inhale a dagger through my chest, I tried to stand, but only managed to sit on a cool rock. My eyes began to focus once more and take in my surroundings. There were definitely people running around, but I couldn't tell for what reason. Debris hung about the air, and the heat from the fire was getting hotter. The rock I leaned on, I realized, was our broken ship. Though, being able to sit up, I was able to breathe slightly easier now, but the ringing in my ears still pounded my head, and I couldn't make out much. The crew was firing their blasters at something, but I couldn't tell what it was. Then, out of nowhere, Commander Harris swam into my field of view. He looked upset, but without hearing his words, I couldn't tell what he was worried about. He handed a bag to me, but in my haze, I couldn't tell what it was. I tried to ask, but alas, could not make a sound. There was one word that the commander was shouting over and over again. It sounded familiar. Ambush. In that moment, my senses sharpened to complete clarity. My adrenaline began to rush as the fog that had set upon my head lifted in an instant. This was battle. I then focused on the commander, but to my surprise, found him convulsing on the ground. I ran to him, my chest still on fire with pain, but none of that mattered now. The commander was bleeding profusely. He had a serious wound to the head, but it wouldn't be fatal. But the hole in his chest, well, that was a different story. Something incredibly powerful was the only thing that could have created an injury like that. He was already gone. The screeching began again. I looked around, but saw nothing. But then, like lightning, it struck. With inhuman speed, the creature lunged on 5 of our crew. Bag in hand, the only thing my brain thought of was running. So I did. I booked it. The wreckage that was our ship was severely overheating now, and I had to shield my face from the flames. I tucked the bag under my arm and tried to regain my bearings. There was a sudden moment of silence, where the only thing that could be heard was the whistling of the wind. I looked around. It was a massacre. Crews and supplies, partially obscured by smoke, littered the snowy terrain we crashed on. But suddenly, I heard a faint groan behind me. I whipped around, thinking it was my imagination, but again, a cry floated through the air, and I ran towards the sound, trying to identify the direction it came from. Unfortunately, the creature heard it too. The awful screeching filled my ears once more and drowned out the cry of the crew member. I immediately ducked under a wing, hoping it wouldn't see me. Frantically, I looked around and finally saw a huddled mass behind one of the rockets of the ship. Without a second thought, I sprinted towards him. The soldier was in bad shape. His right arm was bent at an unnatural angle, dislocated by the look of it, and his leg was broken. "Soldier, can you hear me?" I yelled. He barely groaned, but was able to nod his head. I knew I was going to have to pop the shoulder joint back if we wanted any chance of survival. I placed my hands on his elbow and shoulder. "This is going to hurt," I warned. But before he could complain, I popped the limb back into position. He let loose a gasp as the bone nestled familiarly where it was supposed to go. Once again, the bone-chilling screech from the creature reverberated overhead. As we crouched, the wreckage grew warmer and warmer, and I distinctly noticed that I was profusely sweating in the snow. From the state of the rockets, I guess we had a couple minutes tops before the whole thing blew. I looked around in despair, seeing no place that we could escape the onslaught from above. The only landmark that could be made out through the blizzard was a large rocky outcropping about 100 yards away. It was our only chance. Slinging the soldier's arm on my shoulders, I hoisted him up from the waist. Grabbing the bag that Commander Harris entrusted to me, we tried to run, but he could barely place any weight on his foot. We covered a mere body length before we sank into the snow once more. We were sitting ducks. So much for our escape. However, that didn't matter, because all of a sudden my stomach made a sickening drop. It was then that I realized it was right behind us. Well, that is Chapter 1 of the Quarantine Chronicles. Join us next week to find out what happens next.